Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode in our Unreal Engine 4 series, making a first-person shooter. In the last video, we started creating our character. We gave him some arms, created a material for that. In this one, to prevent him from just standing there awkwardly in the A pose all the time, we're going to be doing some work in this animation blueprint to give him some movement. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is open up our player AnimBP. And if you haven't worked in an animation blueprint before, essentially a animation blueprint is a blueprint that links up with a certain skeleton and part of a certain character. So if I were to go on my skeletal mesh on my player's arms, which are these things, you can see that the mesh or the animation has an animation blueprint associated with it, and it is this one that we created in the last video. So whatever we do in here will be outputted here on our character. So anything that we plug into this output pose is, well, going to be outputted to our character. An animation blueprint has an animation graph and an event graph. The event graph is essentially just a graph that links variables that will create two variables found within this blueprint. That'll make more sense when we actually do it. And then the animation graph is where we actually implement the rules that will decide which animations to play when. That's kind of the best way I can explain it right now. But it'll make more sense when we actually start putting some stuff in here. So what we want to do first is we want to create an animation blend space. So with our character folder open, let's right click in empty space and go to animation and blend space, not splice, 1D. And we're going to use our player skeleton, which is right here, the one that we created. And let's call this idle run. So idle run is a very common type of blend space. Blend spaces allow you to place multiple animations within them, and then you can change essentially which animation you're playing based on a certain axis value. So in this case, our name is going to be speed. And what we're going to be doing in this blend space is we're going to be transitioning from an idle pose to a walking pose, and that is going to be dictated by our speed. 4 grid divisions are okay. Our maximum axis value, we're going to make 600. If you remember in the last video, we set our character movement to 750. So if we are going 600 and above, I want to switch between two different animations. So rifle idle is the first one that we want to grab, and we're going to drag this at 0 right here. This green dial is what we can see to kind of move between. You can see the speed value changing right there in the preview value right there. And we're going to need to grab another animation because these weren't default. We had to create a new skeleton in the last video. So let's go to shooter game animations, first person player animations right here. And we want to do, it's not rodeo run, rifle. There should just be like a rifle run. Aim, equip, fire. Am I blind? Here it is. FPP rifle run. Double click on that. Could not find skeleton, so we're going to assign it to our player skeleton. It's going to retarget, and you can see there it is moving there. So go ahead and hit save. We can pause it. We can mess with the sounds of that later. Okay. And I think I exited out of our blend space. It's awkward. So I'm going to open that back on up. Then I'm going to take our rifle run. I'm going to drag that at 600. So now you can see if our speed's increasing, you can see that animation changing from the idle one to the running one, or the walking one, or whatever you want to call it. So we're going to hit save. That is looking good. And now let's go into our animation blueprint. Event blueprint update animation. Okay. So in some empty space in the event graph, we're going to search for an event, blueprint, initialize animation. This is the equivalent of an event begin play for animation blueprints. What we want to do is let's right click and say get owning actor. Sometimes you say get player character, get player pawn. Sometimes it doesn't matter, but we're going to cast to our BP, not BO, BP player. Whatever the object is, it just sometimes changes. This is the only time we're not really going to be using casting or getting the character. Let's right click on BP player and promote this to a variable, and we'll call this player. So all this did was we created a reference to player, so that now what we can do is we can pull this out, we can get it, and then any sort of variable that is found within here or function or whatever, we can just pull out of there. So creating references to things is something that we're going to be doing a lot. We'll mainly be creating references to our player. Okay, so now down here, event, blueprint, update, animation. I'm going to call out a sequence node. Not actually going to be doing anything out of this sequence just yet, but just for future reference. Out of then one, we'll say is valid with the question mark and plug that into try get pawn owner. An is valid node is essentially just a way to it's kind of given the computer common sense. So if something, I actually don't even know how to explain it, but it's saying like it'll make sense. We'll be using this in the next video as well, and I'll explain it in more detail there because it'll be a lot easier to explain kind of what it does there. Okay, now let's head on over to our anim graph, and we're gonna right click and we're going to look up a state, add a new state machine, and oops, I want to click on this and rename this, and we'll call this player movement. And we'll, for the time being, let's just put this right into the output pose directly. If you double click on a state machine, you'll see this entry bubble. And what you can do is drag out and you can add states. We're not going to be messing with any conduit states or whatever. So let's drag out and let's add a state, and we'll call this idle run. So if you're unfamiliar with state machines, these states are where you will plug your animations in, and then you can create transitions from, so if I added a different state, these things essentially are conditions that need to be true or false to transition between different animations. Like I said, a lot of this stuff makes sense like when you're actually doing it. So let's double click on idle run, and what we want to do is we want to grab our blend space named idle run and plug that into the output pose. And what you'll notice with this one is that it has a speed variable. So if we open, you don't have to do this, but see we have our name for speed. So that's what it's grabbing right here. So right now it's set to 0. And we don't want that always be set as 0, because if it's always set as 0, then we will always be right there. So we want to link this up to our character's speed. So let's right click here, promote this to a variable, and we'll just call that speed. And that's all that we need to do in there. So now if we go back to the event graph, out of try get pawn owner, we're going to get velocity. So we're getting the velocity of our character. Then we want to get vector length. And then we want to take our speed and set that. And we want this to come out of the is valid branch. So what this is doing right here, this first part, is it's getting the velocity of our character, getting the length of that vector, and then setting that to this variable that we created called speed, which is set up in here to control which animations that we're running. So for this comment box, I'm just going to say sets up walking and idle animations. Something like that. Bada bang, bada boom. So it should look like this, and then that. Player movement, idle run. We only have one state right now doing that. So now if you compile we have him in idle. And if you hit play, you can see that we have some arms here. We don't have a lot of real estate, so temporarily I'm just gonna fill down Alt. It'll make, oh gosh, I did not want my thing set to 10. Hold down Alt, it'll make a copy of something. Just giving myself some room to walk. Now if I hit play, so you can see I'm now idle, and then when I move, I'm doing the walking animation. We're not actually holding any sort of weapon, so it's a little bit hard to see. But that is how that works. Probably gonna redo this environment in between videos. The last thing that we can do here is that if you actually go here and go to rifle run, you'll see that we have these little notifies, and you can right click anywhere and add a notify inside of an animation and play like a particle effect or a sound or anything. These sounds are actually kind of busted here, so it's play sound, it's not actually implemented. So like we can put whatever sound that we want in here, and then whenever this animation plays and crosses over there, it'll actually play whatever sound that we slot in there. So I believe that because we got the sounds over here, that we have footstep sounds, grass, metal, tile, and I think that they're kind of busted up like that. So, oh man, grass, metal, tile. Here we got fully run. Okay, so sheesh. Okay, so copy pasting this stuff over kind of screwed us up. So what we'll do here, so just follow where I am, shooter game, sounds, right here, fully run. Open this up, and we're just gonna slot these things in here, this sound wave. So we got fully run 1 through 10. So 1. I'll give you a second to do this and then come back. Okay, now that all of our run waves are now properly put back into this randomizer and outputted, this sound cue should actually work. So inside of our rifle run animation, if you hit play sound, and then we go to sound cue fully run, so you can actually hear it. I'm gonna make the volume multiplier 1. I want it to be a little bit louder, and then we'll do the same thing right here. Set it to 1. Hit save. So now I got rid of my floor. What am I doing? So now whenever we walk, you should hear some footsteps. And I fall right off the map, but you can kind of, it has that ambient sound here. Let me actually get rid of that so you can hear the sound steps better. Footsteps better. Sound steps. Come on, Tim. Okay, and if you don't feel like that's in the right spot, you can move these around to different locations and preview it in here, like that. But yeah, that's how we can add just basic walking into our game. So in the next video, we're going to continue on and actually start putting some weapons in these hands. So I hope to see you there.